New Pokémon Snap, a prequel to the Nintendo 64 game, Pokémon Snap. A game famous for its unique gameplay style of playing as a wildlife photographer, but also famous for being a very simple, short, and also repetitive game. So, in my opinion, the bar just isn't very high for this game to top, and let's be honest, the highest bar this game has to top was people's nostalgia. So, in this review today, I'm not really going to be comparing it much to the original, as I'm really gonna try and just judge it purely on its own merits, because realistically, this is also a lot of people's first Pokemon Snap game, given that in my case, the last one came out a few weeks before I was born. So, with this introduction out of the way, let's get into the actual review. Starting with the story, which is very simple and kid friendly, following the story of you, the main character, going into the Lental region to, of course, take pictures of Pokemon. A new region that has a very diversified weather, to say the least, which makes sense given you want some variety in the gameplay, but more on that later. To say that there is a plot here would be stretching it though. Things just kinda happened to open up new areas and add features to the gameplay. Even the characters here aren't much more than a vehicle to push the gameplay forward and give you objectives. And honestly, that's fine. It's bland, but there's nothing wrong with it. I personally would have preferred a bit more stakes or just more compelling reasons to photograph these Pokemons. But I get that the opportunity to photograph these Pokemons is the selling point, and I get that this is going for a much more laid back pick up and play type of game. I surely wasn't expecting anything in terms of some moral or overarching themes of, I don't know, saving endangered species. The closest thing to a plot is this magic in these called Illumina orbs that eventually lead to the final level and a sort of climax of the game, but it really just feels like it exists for the sake of a climax. While these orbs are very important throughout the game and are important to the finale, but finale just kinda happens. It's like the game has decided that it needs to wrap up and that there's been enough levels to be considered a game, and I think it feels a bit forced. It's like this laid back experience suddenly is trying to get mysterious to excite you for its ending, and it almost could have worked if the ending wasn't so boring, in my opinion, and you will understand this when I talk about the bosses later. Regardless, the story of Pokemon Snap is bland, but unoffensively so, and honestly, no one is buying this game for that, so it's okay, I guess. Speaking of the laid back feel though, let's now talk about the gameplay. And laid back is really the way the game wants you to play it. This game wants you to take pauses or just play in small bites, going only for a run or two each time. Because playing this game like I have to for these reviews can get pretty grating. But why is that? Well, first let's talk about the basics. In a way, Pokemon Snap could be considered a sort of on-rail shooter, except for, of course, instead of shooting guns, you shoot your camera, take photos. And the controls are fairly simple. You can look around and rotate a full 360 degrees using the left stick, which moves the whole camera, and the right stick, which moves the focus point of the picture, but can also move the camera if you push it to its edges, just much slower. And to round off, the movement also has snap turns that can be used with a D-pad, allowing you to quickly look back and forwards or snap 45 degrees left and right. This is pretty useful given that the left stick moving the camera is still relatively slow. Now, the actual action of the game, taking pictures of Pokemon, it's pretty simple in concept. You just want whatever Pokemon you're trying to photograph to be the main focus of the picture. Adding then to the complexity is a few systems, but primarily the point rating system at the end of each run that you do through one of the maps. The game will sort pictures by Pokemon for you to pick through. When it comes to pictures with multiple Pokemon, the game usually picks whatever Pokemon it thinks is the main focus of the photo, which can lead to some odd decisions, but regardless, each Pokemon picture you pick is rated in points, which decide the value of the picture, going from bronze to silver to gold and finally the platinum rating. And this adds a little bit of challenge as you'll have to know the specific things that make one picture better than others, even if again how these are rated by the game can sometimes be very weird, especially when dealing with bigger Pokemon and how pictures where they barely fit in the frame end up being the highest rated ones, and this is partly because of things that affect what the picture is based on. There are 5 main things the game judges your picture on, even though again how the game processes this can be awkward sometimes. But regardless, the first and probably more important one is the pose. I'll speak in more detail about this specific one in a bit, but basically it's an action you make happen or catch the Pokemon doing. This is definitely the thing adding the most challenge to the photographing, and it also affects another very important piece of the photo rating, but more on that later. Then we have the size, or maybe more correctly how close the Pokemon is to the camera, or how big he is in the picture. This of course being helped by the zoom feature, which I failed to mention this far. Yes, it is here, this is a game about taking photos, but it is a one size fits all zoom, because you can't actually change the level of zoom. It's either zoomed in or it's zoomed out, which is a bit of a shame, but given this is a bit more of an arcadey game about catching Pokemon doing things than an artistic photo taking game like Umurangi Generation, so I think it's okay. Moving on then, next one, direction. This one is pretty straightforward. Haha. You generally want the Pokemon to be facing the camera. Equally simple is our next one, placement, which you would maybe think it's about where your Pokemon is placed in the area, like atop of a rock or flying, but no, it's really just how centered it is in the photo, which is a bit lame, but whatever. Then the final one is other Pokemon, which is like the name suggests, basically extra points for having different Pokemons in the picture. There is technically a 6th measuring called background, but this is reserved for items in the stage that are usually, you guessed it, in the background. These are mostly used to unlock certain features and also some new paths in a certain route, which we will talk about more in a bit, which I've been saying a lot, I'm sorry. First, we have to talk about the only straightforward hint you get before the points rating, and that is the star rating. There are 4 stars, and you can hold one of each number of stars in your photo album, as most pictures you take will get discarded after a run, even though you can save and even edit any photo regardless of score. That being said, doing so is a bit of a slow process and not really something I personally care to play too much with, which is a shame as most of the unlocks you do get from this game are filters and borders to add to your photos in this edit mode, as regular scored photos that also get saved are saved as is. Like I was saying before, you can have one of each star rating, so 4 in total, and you can of course choose to substitute them at the rating phase, as higher rated photos will have their stars displayed in the color of that rating, so optimally you would want all of them to be platinum colored, but if you really want to, you can just stick whatever picture you like the most. It doesn't really stop you from substituting a platinum rated picture with a bronze one, but you have to decide on the spot or it will just be forever lost after that. After the rating is done though, you get points which eventually level up the area you took the photos in, and each level up you potentially unlock new events and Pokemons in that specific map, or even unlock new maps altogether. Usually you need to reach level 2 in each map before the next one is unlocked, but at a certain point you'll need more than that to progress, as often you'll be needing to unlock a secret path or having to unlock a certain ability before you can move on. This happening by taking pictures of an item or that secret path, and while this adds a nice change of pace, besides just replaying the levels until you get a new one, it can also be somewhat cryptic, especially about halfway through it, as most of the characters will only give you vague clues, and that's because the way it's supposed to work is that you should already know what you're looking for because you've done it before in early levels, because there these paths or items weren't hidden, they were obvious and in the open, and that was so you could see them and learn about it in that way, so you know what to do later or when they are better hidden. The problem is, because they were so obvious and in the open, it's easy to just photograph them on accident and then not understand that that act of taking a photograph of it and not rate it, it was what triggered the event that opened the next level, or ability needed to open that next level. The example I have that happened to me was that I needed to take a picture of a glowing flower to get a new Illumina orb, which is an item I'll talk more about in detail later. The thing is, all my pictures of similar flowers in the album were not glowing, and that's because when you take a picture of one of these items for progression, you don't rate it. That, coupled with the fact that this specific flower was only photographable for a very short time during a scene where your machine is about to quickly fall down a hill, then well, maybe you can see how I felt like I was hitting a wall. I got to the point where I completely unlocked another much longer path before unlocking this one, which that is actually a good thing because it means I for one got to keep playing and learn more about that certain way to unlock the path in another area. And I would almost think that's how it's supposed to experience the game, but from looking up online, it seems most people just do that other path I was stuck on first. And also you get a pretty useful upgrade from doing that path first. That just makes the game a lot easier and faster. So regardless, maybe this is just a me thing, but still I felt it was an important thing to talk about because it was my experience. Now bringing it back to the stars rating and also the poses, because that seems to be what the star rating are based on, or at least the actions that lead to the poses. For example, taking a simple picture of a Pokémon is a 1 star, but taking a picture of a Pokémon eating an apple will be 2 stars, with 4 stars being of course the most complex or craziest actions that might require your intervention to even happen, which leads us to talk about the items and abilities you get throughout the game. The first one being the apple, which I already casually mentioned, but this is a very versatile item, not just used to feed Pokemon, but also waking them up or hurting them. Not hurting them, they just stun them. It specifically says that in the item description that it does not hurt the Pokemon, even though some of the expressions this Pokemon give would tell you otherwise. Regardless, then we have another throwable item, the Illumina orbs. There are a few different types of Illumina orbs, one for each island, but they all do the same thing, and that is activate certain things in the environment that will affect the Pokemon or reveal previously hidden Pokemon. Or you can even hit Pokemons directly and have it glow, which might not really affect the Pokemon that it hit, but it might change how other Pokemon react to it. This Illumina orb plays a big part into the story, especially towards the end, like I said in the story bit, but in the actual gameplay, they end up working a lot more like any other item. Next item then, or I guess this time ability, this is the melody player. This is a song you can play at will, and it will usually make Pokemons dance. This one might be the most basic ability, given it's only really useful a handful of situations. After this then we have our two final abilities that you get very late in the game, but because of what they do I don't think it's particularly a spoiler, but you've been warned. So these are the Turbo and Burst mode. Turbo allowing you to move faster throughout the levels, allowing you to speed things up, obviously, but much more importantly, catch Pokemons doing certain activities that they were either unviewable before or just happened to be visible at angles that didn't really allow for a clean or high scoring picture. It's a very useful addition, and like I said earlier when I said about taking the other path, I wish I didn't, and I wish I had unlocked this one much earlier, like most people did. Then the burst mode is exactly what it sounds like, a lot of pictures sequentially, and it's very useful to 100% the game, so it makes sense you only get it after having finished the story. And it also makes sense for it to not show up earlier because in each run you can only take a certain amount of photos before you run out, so having this ability early on could create some awkward moments for the less experienced player. At the end of the day though, the items and abilities of this game are serviceable, but they are the second most important addition to the game because they add so much more ways to interact with the Pokemon. The first one though has to be the locations. There is just so many more locations and location variety in this game, which this series was in dire need of, and it boosts the time to beat of this game tremendously, making it a 10 to 12 hour game. There are about 6 main islands, while each island having on average 2 areas and each area usually having a day and night stage and maybe a secret path area or a boss area, which I will let up to you to do the math on that, but it's a lot. But even with that, it's still very squeezed for content, given each stage only lasts about 3 minutes before you get the turbo ability, and that's fine. Honestly, it is a game made for replayability and you want to go back and replay levels to get better photos and try out new abilities which might reveal something new in that older area. And the areas vary a lot in fauna, going between jungles, deserts, snowy areas to name a few. But also because of these short and repetitive levels, this also means that it is a bit jarring to try and play this game in long sessions like I alluded to at the beginning. But it's still good, but it's not all roses. Boss levels are, in my opinion, not so much bad as they are just boring. The thing about Pokemon Snap levels that stop them from being boring is that there is always something going on. You really feel like you're working hard to try and capture as much as you can in each run. But when it comes to the boss levels, it is very much a very slow experience, usually focusing on a single Pokemon, while it is normally a much bigger one and interesting Pokemon, it's still a single one. To photograph through an entire normal size level. To put into perspective, in a regular level, you take pictures of about at least 14 unique Pokemon, even in the early levels. So winding it down to one, even if it's a special one, can feel very boring to me. To remedy this, you usually have to do some small objectives throughout the level to activate the power of the Pokemon, usually involving the Illumina orbs, and you have to do this to even be able to get a usable photograph, but they're usually very simple and sometimes you can do it quickly enough that you can do it at the beginning of the level, meaning you only really have incentive to continue for a higher score, which is fine, but a high score is a lot less compelling if a level also isn't interesting. Final thing though, I can't believe they didn't take advantage of the gyroscope abilities of this game to use the actual Switch as a pretend camera and actually move it around in handheld mode, or even a VR mode for the Nintendo Lab accessories, like they did for Mario Kart. But whatever, I guess. Overall, though, gameplay is good. It's fine. Like I said early on, it's good in small chunks, but there is not enough here to keep you on the hook for a long sitting, even with the variety of environments, which leads us to talk about the graphics. And this game looks fine. That's all I really have to say about it. It looks like a Pokemon game, it's cartoony, and that really helps it because it's clear that in a technical way, Pokémon Snap is not pulling any punches. Lighting is very simple, there are very few weather effects, which in a game like this could have really used more of, given its settings. There are some fog and even some tornadoes, but only in very specific locations. And again, not very technically impressive. But even not being impressive, I still would have liked to see more of it. When I first saw a tornado in the game, it was a really nice surprise, especially how it worked with the Pokemon, and by work I mean how it completely wrecked them. Overall though, the graphics of the new Pokemon Snap are just fine. It is very helped by the general aesthetic of Pokemon, but it's also just very serviceable. It doesn't look as unpolished as Sword and Shield, but it also doesn't have anything that makes it stand out like Let's Go Pikachu / Eevee. Moving on to the soundtrack then, and same old, it is very serviceable. What does stand out is the environmental sounds, the Pokemons themselves and the sound of the water and wind and the rustling of the leaves, or at night even when you can hear the snoring and even the individual steps of the animals still awake. It really adds a needed dimension to this game, and I would recommend playing this one with a pair of headphones, which I think might really add to the experience of being this photographer just trying to capture this fictional wildlife, and well, I enjoyed that. Now though, we reach the end of this review. And to round it all off, while New Pokémon Snap is a good game and it does have some interesting things going for it, I can't help but to feel like the complete package is a bit lacking and a bit bland, but still an enjoyable experience. And for that, I'm giving New Pokémon Snap a 6 out of 10. It is a positive rating. I know when it comes to gaming and even other mediums, it can feel like anything under a 7 or an 8 is a bad game, but that's stupid. That's not how I think ratings should work, and here a 6 is a good game. And recommendations wise, if you want to play a new Pokemon Snap game, that's funny because the game is called New Pokémon Snap. I hate that name, by the way, because this game is not gonna be new forever. But regardless, if you wanna play a Pokémon Snap game, if you never tried one out, then this is the one. There's no continuity to worry about, and this one just has a lot more content than the original. Also just a lot more accessible than a game stuck on a 25-year-old console. Price-wise though, this is a Nintendo game, so it's full price, even if it doesn't feel like it. Lucky enough though, it hasn't been a month since this game came out, and I have already seen it discounted at almost $40, which I think is a much more digestible price for a game of this scope. And if you really want to play this game, you already know you're gonna like it, then I guess that's a fair price. But if you're just curious to play the game, maybe because you like Pokemon and you never tried this series, which might be the case for a lot of people, then I would wait for something more under the 30 line. But this is Nintendo and their games don't really lower in price very often with time outside of discounts, so it might be a bit harder for you to do that, especially depending on where you live. Regardless, it is at the end of the day up to you and however you value your money. But regardless of that, I hope that you enjoyed watching, and if so, please consider subscribing, liking and commenting, all things you can do for free here on YouTube. And regardless of that, I hope you're having a good day and goodbye.